Malikah Shabazz, the youngest daughter of civil rights icon Malcolm X, was found dead in her Brooklyn apartment on Monday. Shabazz was found unresponsive by her daughter. The cause of death has not been determined and police do not suspect foul play. But a senior police official did say accidental food poisoning may have contributed to her death. Shabazz's death is the latest tragedy to strike the family of Malcolm X. Malcolm himself was assassinated in 1965, and his wife, Betty Shabazz, died from injuries sustained in a house fire in 1997. Her 12-year-old grandson, Malcolm Shabazz, later pled guilty to setting the fire. He served 5 years in juvenile detention. Then in 2013, he died after a bar fight in Mexico. Joining me now to discuss is the founding director of the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy at the University of Texas at Austin, Peniel Joseph. Mr. Joseph, this is just a complete tragedy for this family. You know, I was thinking about this earlier today, and, you know, the only kind of reference for a very well-known kind of politically active family, you know, kind of facing tragedy after tragedy that I could think of was kind of like a Kennedy tragedy, that the Malcolm X family has become the black community's Kennedy. I just want to get your thoughts on, you know, the tragedies in this family.
Yeah, you know, Charles, I mean, I think it's a sad day for all of us because in a lot of ways, Malcolm X and Dr. King's families are African-American royalty. In a way, we obviously have the first black president's family, Barack Obama, who people feel very connected to. But I think when we think about Malcolm X's life, the tragedy of his father's death at the age of 6 in 1931 in Lansing, Michigan, and Malcolm always remembers that death as a lynching. His mother's institutionalization in Kalamazoo, Michigan, in a psychiatric hospital starting in 1938 when Malcolm was 13 years old. And then, of course, you know, Malcolm himself is assassinated February 21st, 1965. And really, his youngest daughter, who just passed, really never knew her father. She was born after Betty was pregnant with twins. And so in a lot of ways, and you talked about how Dr. Betty Shabazz was killed in that really the accidental fire that nonetheless her grandchild had to spend years in juvenile detention for, and then his subsequent death. So there's been a lot of tragedy there, I think, in a lot of ways. Just like when we think about the Kennedy family, growing up, the son or the daughters here, or just the children of these iconic individuals is very, very difficult. And we know that Dr. King's children had difficulties, so have Malcolm X's children, the Kennedy's children. But the difference with Malcolm and his family is that they didn't have the wealth, obviously, of the Kennedy family to fall back on, because we think about John F. Kennedy, who only had 2 surviving children. Bobby Kennedy ended up with about 13 children, and many of them suffered many kind of sort of addictions and problems over the years that sort of get swept under the rug, whereas the children of sort of these black prominent icons, we focus on their travails.
What do we know about Malikah's relationship to her father's legacy and her own life before this incident?
Well, I think Malikah, and you know, is someone who's had, you know, in some ways had her own challenges and difficulties, and that's what I said. In a lot of ways, this is very similar to the children of Bobby Kennedy, who had a lot of challenges. On one level, obviously reveres and honors her father's legacy, but also had to grow up in the shadow of that legacy without ever having really known him, and at times pitted against different people. We know about tensions, obviously, between Malcolm X's family and the Nation of Islam, especially Minister Louis Farrakhan, and whatever role Farrakhan is alleged to have played in their father's assassination. So in a lot of ways, I think each of the sisters have had a different relationship, and some have been able to handle being the steward of their father's legacy in better ways than others. And some of that has to do with folks like Ilyasa, who doing these incredible jobs. They knew their father, even though their father passed away when they were young, so they had more of a tangible connection. So I think in a lot of ways, his daughters have suffered through unspeakable trauma, and in a lot of ways, who amongst us would be able to thrive in a spotlight where our father or our mother were killed before we were even born, and we find out that these folks are icons who millions of people admire, but we never actually got a chance to meet. So from that perspective, I think it's sort of a legacy of certainly joy and pride, but one of deep trauma as well.
Yeah, I think, I will say as we close up here that I think the thoughts and prayers of everybody in the community is with this family. It's a lot too much for any family to bear, and our thoughts and prayers are particularly with Malcolm's children, and this is one of their siblings tonight. Peniel Joseph, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate your time.